Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.
Here at Fields & Brown Barbershop, legacy means a lot. We're trying to fill big shoes left by my two uncles and my grandfather, where every haircut came with conversation and every customer left a little taller than when they walked in. The barbershop is about pride. It's about knowing your barber knows your name and your story. Come see us at Fields & Brown Barbershop, where tradition never goes out of style. 3 generations, 1 legacy, your barbershop.
Arctic Air keeps your home or business comfortable. For more than 20 years, we provided outstanding residential and commercial services through southern Middle Tennessee. Whether you need assistance with your heat, air conditioning, preventive maintenance, or anything in between, trust our reliable team to get the job done. We'll take the time to figure out your specific needs and recommend what we believe is right and best for your situation.
We've been using Arctic Air for over 15 years now. Their service is great, they're here when we need them, and their prices are competitive. They take the worry out of the heat and air so I don't have to.
Arctic Air. When you need us, we'll be there.
Financial advisor Scott Beasley knows time spent with family is everything. As a founder of Beasley Wealth Management, his mission is to give clients the freedom to enjoy time with family without the burden of financial concerns. A local of Lawrenceburg, Scott deeply values building relationships with clients, ensuring they make informed decisions concerning asset management, tax planning, and retirement planning. Offering a free initial consultation, Beasley Wealth Management helps clients pursue their aspirations with confidence.
Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.
And welcome in, everybody, to this Tuesday edition of the Mark My Words College Sports Show here on the X Sports Network. I'm your host, Michael Marks, and we're going to break down everything that was going on inside of Week 5 of college football, and it was so far probably the best week of the season. We'll look at the new AP poll. We'll talk about maybe some coach firings, some Heisman hopefuls. We got a ton of stuff, so we'll jump right into it, and we're going to break it down from Friday night, because Friday night had some great games. We're going to go through the Saturday morning slot, the afternoon slot, and the night slot. So we have a ton of great games to break down. And we'll start off with the big one from Friday night. Number 8 Florida State on the road at unranked Virginia. And how about the Cavaliers picking up a big win into double overtime, 46-38. UVA was able to get it done. And, Florida State fans have long said they like to get the short end of the stick when it comes to officiating. Me personally, as a Tennessee guy, know about the College World Series from a couple of years ago. Was it a check swing? Was it not a check swing? And they think that it happened again in football with the touchdown catch in overtime. I don't think they really have much of an argument here. The guy bobbled the ball going out of bounds. You can say this, you can say that, but he bobbled it before he had control of the ball and went out of bounds. So I don't know if you have really much of an argument there, but listen, I'm not going to say I was calling the upset, but this is one I saw being a close game all week. Sad I wasn't able to do the prediction show Friday, but this game felt so much like Miami and Virginia Tech from last season. A game on a Friday night at home for a big Friday night for a highly ranked ACC team, and they were facing off against a team that maybe you didn't know as much about at the time, because Virginia, we didn't know much about. They were 3-1, but so are most teams that play all their non-conference games at the beginning of the season. You don't know what you're going to get from them. And they hung around. Chandler Morris, quarterback, was absolutely huge for Virginia, had 5 touchdowns total, 2 through the air, 3 on the ground. And, Virginia's still unbeaten in conference play, folks. the NC State game that they lost earlier in the season did not count as a conference game. It was due to Indiana dropping UVA from their schedule, and NC State needed another Power 4 game, so they signed an agreement to play a non-conference ACC matchup. It felt kind of weird, but this is one that I really feel like Florida State had an opportunity to really run away with it. They got down 14-0 early due to turnovers, and then they came back and took the lead in the second quarter, 21-14. And that was a moment that I really feel like they should have run away with it. But I think we saw, I'm not going to say the best of Florida State, but I think we saw closer to their peak week 1 against Alabama, and I think they have not necessarily been regressing, but they haven't necessarily gotten a whole lot better since then. Obviously, when you have Alabama coming to your stadium, that's a big game, that's a big deal. You need to impress some people, but you got to build on it. And Florida State didn't do that, and now they have a big conference loss heading into a big game next weekend against the Canes. It's the first time that FSU-Miami game has had really any kind of big game feel probably in the last decade or so, maybe longer. So that game will be exciting on Saturday, and we'll break that one down a little more later in the week on our Thursday prediction show. But listen, I think I might honestly feel better about Florida State versus Miami now, knowing that Florida State has been beaten. They know that they're not perfect. And, even if they won that game against Virginia, say flipped the score, say they won that one 46-38, I would feel really, really good about Miami going into that one, just because Florida State's been tested now, and they didn't pass it with flying colors, and a win isn't going to feel nearly the same as a loss in this scenario, especially with it being a conference game that you thought you had in the bag. Now, if Florida State went on from that 21-14 game and went on and won 42-17 or something like that, I would feel really good about Florida State and Miami. Is that it's probably going to be a top 5 matchup or pretty close to it. Now, not as much, obviously, with Florida State losing and dropping, and we'll get back into how far they dropped in the AP poll in the next segment. But listen, I think that now they've been beaten. Florida State has, as opposed to not getting punched in. I would feel better about them getting punched in the face before they head to Miami, because this was a 2-10 team last year. They have nobody that was on that team last year. Or is on this team last year from last year has no semblance of consistency. They just lost last year and kept losing and kept losing. So I think this year is about building consistency. I still think that Florida State is probably going to be a playoff team, but definitely right now on the outside looking in. But they got some big games, and if they want to get back in the playoff hunt, they have to win this one right here. We'll go head west out to Tempe, Arizona, where number 24 TCU on the road in their first game as a ranked team this year, and they met that Arizona State buzzsaw. Final score, Arizona State 27, TCU 24, and turnovers, man. Friday night was full of them, and it kind of cost TCU the game. 3-to-1 turnover ratio in this game. Josh Hoover did not have his best game, and Arizona State's rush defense / pass rush is really, really good. And this even goes into talking about their offensive line and running backs. Rush yards favored Arizona State 207-10. That means TCU played a 60-minute college football game and only mustered 10 rushing yards. Now, a lot of that was because Josh Hoover was sacked 6 times, but I think even more of it was just TCU had the complete incapability of running the ball, and Arizona State's pass defense completely shut them down. Obviously Hoover was able to have a decent game to some degree, but it wasn't what we had been seeing from TCU, the same team that was really running over everybody in the first couple of weeks. Obviously, we saw how they looked against UNC in that big week 1, but 20 of 32 for 242 and 2 interceptions is not going to cut it for a Big 12 quarterback. Sam Leavitt had an awesome game. I think he's gained a ton of confidence since that Mississippi State game. 27 of 39, 291, and 2 touchdowns, but it really helps when you have, I don't know if he's the favorite, but right now he would probably have my vote for the Blitnikoff Award. Jordan Tyson is amazing. The junior wideout, 8 catches, 122 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Take him out of that game and replace him with an average receiver, I think Arizona State gets beat. But Raleek Brown was really big on the ground, 21 carries, $134. Wasn't able to score, but Sam Leavitt had 3 touchdowns, 2 on the air, 1 on the ground. A huge win there for Arizona State. Now we'll go over to Saturday morning, a game and that I was really looking forward to, honestly. 2-2 Duke heading up to it used to be the Carrier Dome, to face 3-1 Syracuse. Syracuse, despite coming off a win against Clemson, you lose starting quarterback Steve Angeli to a torn Achilles in that game. Duke, 2-2, has not fared well in either of their tests against big opponents this year, falling to Tulane and to Illinois. But man, Duke 38, Syracuse 3. Whew, I mean, that one was a absolute whooping from start to finish. Darian Mensah looked really good, and I think Duke maybe has almost solved the formula when it comes to Darian Mensah. In their games early in the season when he was struggling, like Illinois, you look at his stat line in that game, 23 of 34. He wasn't necessarily much of a problem in that game. That was more of just Illinois playing really good. But you look at the Tulane game that they lost 34-27. He threw the ball 51 times in that game. And nothing against Darian Mensah, but that's not going to win you a lot of games. So they went up there and didn't ask too much of him. 28 attempts. Completed 22 of them, so a little over 75% completion percentage is awesome. But I mean, I think maybe one of the highlights of the week that isn't getting talked about anywhere because it's Duke football and not Duke basketball, and it's the ACC and football and not the SEC or the Big Ten. Nate Shepherd, freshman tailback for Duke, was awesome. 15 carries, 168 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's kind of what wins you the game. Ricky Collins wasn't great for Syracuse. Wasn't terrible. I mean, obviously they didn't get in the end zone, and they have been scoring a ton of points, so definitely not up to their standards. 24 of 37 for 229, no touchdowns and an interception. Yassine Willis, 11 carries, 63 yards. That's not going to win you a lot of games. And really, you're going to probably start seeing a semblance of this where running the ball is big. And Duke's rush offense and rush defense was great in this game. Duke outran Syracuse by 150 yards in this game. 235 for the Blue Devils, 85 for the Orange. That's not going to win you a game, and especially when, if, say, you're Syracuse and you want to air the ball out, you got to throw for more than 229 because, as a team, Duke outgained Syracuse by nearly 200 yards, 504 to 314. And I mean, this was one Syracuse was really never in from the start, and it really is disappointing because I do feel like if Steve Angeli is still the quarterback at Syracuse, that is not injured, is still able to play, I think Duke wins, or I think Syracuse probably wins more of a 34-28 kind of game and not losing 38-3. We'll jump to another ACC matchup. 3-0 Louisville heading on the road to face off against 2-1 Pitt Panthers. This was the new game on ESPN2, and it was a good one. Pitt looked awesome, jumping out to a 17-0 lead, and then they jumped the Louisville ball boy for some reason. They got an interception. The ball boy did his job and got the ball, and then had 3 or 4 college football players, pretty much assaulting him for the ball back. And I think the play had come off a turnover. And funny that you mentioned turnovers because they played a huge factor in this one again, and not the way that the Panthers fans would like to admit. Louisville ended up winning this game 34-27, and you go look at the comparison on the teams, and you're trying to figure out, what was the big edge. Pitt had 5 turnovers, Louisville 1. Louisville threw an interception, Pitt threw 3. Louisville didn't fumble, Pitt fumbled twice. That really is the difference in this game, because if you watched it, Pitt was playing much better for most of the game, because Louisville's style of offense through this point in the season had been defined by the way they run the ball. Duke Watson, Isaac Brown, guys like that had been huge for them, and they did nothing in this game. Those two combined for 67 yards on 28 attempts. You don't have to be a math major to know that that's not much. But Miller Moss, the transfer quarterback from UFC for Louisville, I think did an outstanding job. Because he hasn't looked great, obviously, through his first couple of games. Louisville's 4-0, but he hasn't looked great. I think probably his best game so far of his Cardinal career. 33 of 51 for 339 and 3 touchdowns with the 1 interception. Also had a rushing touchdown. Was sacked a couple of times, but I think for the most part he played great. because Louisville had been a running team and hadn't asked him to do too much with the ball in the air, and he didn't have to. I mean, you look at some of his games from this year, or some of his games in total just from the past couple of years. He got benched last year at USC, and you see what Jaden Maivia is doing, or Maiva's doing there, and we'll probably get into him a little bit later. He got benched and had to hit the road to a very good Louisville team. Jeff Brom has done an outstanding job. Miller Moss, definitely a name to keep your eye on if you're looking a little bit later down the road when, say, Miami or Florida State has a tough game against Louisville. That guy will definitely be the reason for it. And we'll head over to the game on ABC. If you watch more than a half of this one, not sure why. Notre Dame 56, Arkansas 13. Notre Dame had 420 yards of offense in 2 quarters. It was just domination from start to finish. They had 430 passing yards, and they finished the game with 641 total. 430 through the air, 210 on the ground. That's going to get it done every week. C.J. Carr, freshman quarterback, was awesome, 22 of 30 for 354 and 4 touchdowns. Jeremiah Love had 4 touchdowns, over 120 total yards of offense. But I think the story of this game surprisingly comes from the defensive side of things. I think Notre Dame defensive coordinator Chris Ash and his defense needed that. That was a huge game for them, because if you go back and look at what Arkansas has done this year offensively, you would be shocked that they have the record they do just at the sheer amount of points they put up, the amount of yards they put up. We'll just go back. 52-7 against Alabama A&M, 56-14 against Arkansas State, 41-35 against Ole Miss, 32-31 against Memphis, and then 13. Obviously it's not great, but Taylor Green's thrown for 1,400 yards. He's almost ran for 400. They have another running back behind him who's almost ran for 400 as well. Their offense is great, but that defense was terrible. And their offense had no sign of sin once they scored all 13 of those points in the first half. And, it was 42-13 at halftime. It was just not a good game, but I think Chris Ash's defense did awesome. If you look at the track record of Notre Dame defensive coordinators, it's a pretty lengthy one and a good one at that. So their last defensive coordinator was Al Golden. And we know how good Notre Dame's defense was the past 2 years. Golden took his talents to the NFL and is with the Cincinnati Bengals now. Say what you want about the Bengals defense. They needed Al Golden probably a lot more than Notre Dame did. The guy before him, Marcus Freeman, now the head man up at South Bend, and he's done a great job. Got him there to the national championship in his 4th year there. Just an incredible, his 3rd year there. And you'll know that a lot of Notre Dame coaches get to the national championship in their 3rd year there. Lou Holtz, Brian Kelly. It happened with a lot of the greats. And even before Marcus Freeman, Clark Lee. Look at what he's done with Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has College Game Day following them to Tuscaloosa because that's the biggest game of the weekend in the SEC. We'll discuss that a little later in the week. And even before Clark Lee, it was Mike Elko, who is the head coach at Texas A&M, who, when we get to the AP poll and get to their game, you'll see how good they are. But yeah, just an all-around great game for Notre Dame. Sam Pittman was obviously fired Sunday morning. He went 32-34 in his time at Arkansas. He had a winning record until these last 3 games. They started the season 2-0. They lost 3 straight. Pittman had a winning record in his career overall, but this is the kicker, 14-29 in the SEC. I believe lost 19 one-score games in his time at Arkansas, and that shows you how close they really were, because Sam Pittman is an awesome coach. I just don't think he's fit to be a head coach in the SEC. But listen, somebody is about to get an incredible recruiter and an incredible offensive line coach if he decides to continue looking into coaching. Because if you go back and look at his resume, he's been an offensive line coach everywhere except, I think, one job and the Arkansas head coaching job, away from just being an offensive line coach for the last 30 years. So that shows you what kind of talent this guy has. He was the offensive line coach at Georgia before he was at Arkansas, so he knows some good talent. They let offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino. He was named the interim head coach immediately after and started cleaning house in preparations. I would assume he wants to be the full-time head coach at Arkansas. They fired the defensive coordinator, the co-defensive coordinator, and the defensive line coach. And obviously, after how Notre Dame looked against them Saturday, that's a valid statement. But you look at Arkansas's upcoming schedule. This next week, they're off, which couldn't have come at a better time, honestly. And then the week after that, they have a road game at Tennessee. Now, the Tennessee game is one that I think saved Sam Pittman's job last year. They were his defense. It wasn't their offense that won that game. If you remember, 19-14 was the final score. It was not their offense that won that game. It was their defense that completely shut down what people thought was a good Tennessee offense at the time. Now, looking back, it was far from it. But it feels a little strange that that's your next game and you want to fire the coach that got you the win in that one. Now, it doesn't look like really there's going to be much that can stop Tennessee's offense when we get down the road, but obviously we'll get to that one when we get to it. The big noon kickoff. Number 21, USC at 4-0 on the year, heading on the road to face the 23rd ranked Fighting Illini up in Champaign, Illinois. And this was a game that, heading into it, I felt like Illinois had a pretty good shot, but then they played their game last week against Indiana. They lost 63-10 in that game and was never close, barring them kicking the ball off to start the game. USC had looked really good on offense. Obviously, if Lincoln Riley's the team, they're not going to be good defensively. But they looked really good on offense, not as great on defense. But you felt pretty good about them coming into this game. And listen, this was probably the best overall game of the morning slot, other than Wake Forest and Georgia Tech, who stole a game right there. The ACC officiating stole that one for the Yellow Jackets. But I'm on the Brent Key hype bus, so I'm not going to talk bad about them there. But listen, that game was great. The quarterbacks were great. Luke Altmaier, 330 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jaden Maeva, 360 yards and 2 touchdowns. 2 great quarterbacks. I mean, both of them are probably not going to be in the Heisman voting at the end of the year. Will probably not be first or second team All Big Ten. Maeva may be, but Luke Altmaier not. But they had great games. Those are 2 great quarterbacks, and you can tell. But yeah, props to the Illini. They lost 63-10 last week and didn't show a bit of fight. But they showed a lot. They had a comfortable lead in this one and let Illinois climb back in and take it from them. But that's not surprising from Brett Bielema team. The Illini were just slightly better. You look and you're like, man, what's the stat in this one that was like, oh yeah, that's why Illinois won this one. It was a 2-point game and they kicked the last second field goal. Almost all of these stats are identical, but they were slightly better in a couple of the things like running the ball, third downs, penalties, and that ended up probably costing Illinois a couple points in this one. But let's talk about the Trojans for a little bit. Obviously, through 50 games, Lincoln Riley has a worse record than the guy before him, Helton, and he got ran out of town for Lincoln Riley. So, not the best look there. But I think Mekhi Lemon might be the best receiver in the Big Ten. And I know that the Big Ten has, the Jeremiah Smiths of the world and guys like that. But this dude's stats through the games he's played this year are awesome. Had 11 catches for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. Saturday on the season, 38 receptions, 589 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So the touchdown numbers, not up there with some of the guys like Tyson and some other guys we'll get into a little bit later, is still looked really, really good for an offense. It's going to put up a ton of points. And that's not to say that this USC team doesn't run the ball as well, because they have surprisingly actually ran the ball really well this year. It's not something that you typically see from a Lincoln Riley team, but Wayman Jordan has been really good this year. I mean, just looking at his stats for the season, 77 carries, 537 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That's going to get it done. And that's through 5 games. He's rushing over 100 yards a game through 5 games. So props to USC despite losing and them falling out of the top 25. I still think that the Trojans will be a tough team to take down. If you're a team that's struggling on one side of the ball, they're going to take advantage of that. We'll jump into the afternoon slate. This felt like a Big Ten game, but Texas A&M, number 9 Texas A&M 16, Auburn 10. I think this game solidified the Aggies as probably the scariest team in the conference, in the SEC. They can win shootouts. You saw them go up to South Bend and former defensive coordinator Mike Elko lead his team up there and take down Notre Dame 41-40. Now, that one probably would have gone in overtime and had a lot more points scored in it if Tyler Buckner could hold an extra point. And they can grind it out on defense, too, looking at what they did Saturday. Auburn's offense is terrible, just flat out bad. 177 total yards. They were 0 for 13 on third downs. Their one touchdown drive that they had was a whopping 5 feet. It was a little under 2 yards. And it came off a turnover, and 123 of those 177 yards were on 3 drives that they were able to get the ball across midfield, and they only got the other 3 points out of that. I mean, you're telling me that obviously there weren't a lot of drives in this game. It was a slow, grinded out battle, but you're telling me that they couldn't make up a field goal, 2 field goals somewhere else in this game? Because look, they were in it to win. They had opportunities throughout the middle of this game, but Jackson Arnold again got sacked 5 times, and it's not going to get it done. And looking at total plays, Auburn had 57 plays. They weren't even averaging 3 yards a total per play. Cam Coleman and Jeremiah Cobb, that's the wide receiver one and running back one for Auburn, who were stat-wise some of the better overall in the conference, were absolutely non-existent in that game. Combined for 10 catches or 10 touches for 48 yards, and I don't know how that happens. Cobb 6 touches for 28 yards. Jackson Arnold had almost twice as many carries as the rest of his team put together, and then obviously Cam Coleman 4 catches for 18 yards. I mean, this dude, if you just throw it anywhere in his reach, and he's a big body wide receiver at 6'3", 200 pounds. Put it anywhere in his reach, and he's probably going to make a play. Eric Singleton Jr. was pretty big in this game. Had the 56 yards on 5 catches there. But Auburn's got to find a lot more on offense if they want to be competitive in the SEC this year. And this was one of those prove-it games for them. And all they proved to me is that we need to stop calling Hugh Freeze an offensive guru. I think we need to stop referring to Jackson Arnold as a former 5-star quarterback. He's just not great, and obviously, this is about the point in the season where you kind of, realize he's not that great, and you want him benched, and then by week 8 he'll get you a decent win, and then he'll run the ball 25 times a game after that, and be a slightly better than most running backs at throwing, and just be a running back. But listen, A&M wasn't perfect. That turnover that led to a touchdown was bad. That was in a bad spot. You should not have run that play. 13 penalties for 120 yards. That's a lot, because that's probably some of those yards that went to Auburn. 2 missed field goals. I mean, you probably could have scored a touchdown on a couple of those drives too. I really do feel like this one should have been like 28-3. I don't think Auburn should have gotten that touchdown. I think A&M should have put up a little more. I think they could have. But listen, if you can win a game with 16 points, props to you and your defense. But my player of the game for this one, Le'Veon Moss, was huge. Obviously, Marcel Reed has been all the talk for A&M throughout this year, and rightfully so. We've really seen him come alive as a passer this season. But Le'Veon Moss was injured last year, really hadn't been able to get into a groove until this game. 21 carries, almost 140 yards, and a touchdown. Big props to him. A game that somehow was on a streaming service only, Indiana-Iowa. Big win for the Hoosiers, 25-15 on the road at Iowa. That was the most Iowa football game I have ever watched. That was slow. It was ugly. It was not fun to watch. I'm glad I didn't watch the entirety of the game. And looking at it, Iowa probably should have won this game, and I think they definitely would have won this game if Mark Gronowski doesn't get hurt. You have an opportunity tied at 13 with 2 minutes to go on your side of the 50. You're probably a first down and a minute and a half running off the clock away from winning that one. And, obviously it didn't go your way, and it would have been a great win, but, I don't think Iowa has much to hang their heads on this one, because that Indiana team is legit. 5-0 now. Listen, I mean, Elijah Surratt was huge. Only had 6 catches, 132 yards, and a touchdown in a game against Iowa. I would read off a lot more stats in that game, but they're just ugly because it was an Iowa football game. I mean, you go play by play. Each team had maybe 6 drives in this game. I mean, it's and there are a lot of 3-and-outs. Fernando Mendoza, 13 of 23 for 233 and 2 touchdowns and a pick. Was not great. Roman Hemby had 15 rushes for 86 yards and no touchdowns. But Mark Gronowski was 19 of 25 for 144 yards, no touchdowns, ended up having an interception in there. But, I mean, that's an Iowa quarterback, an interception away from an 80% completion percentage. I mean, Kamari Moulton had 75 yards on the ground. Gronowski did have the rushing touchdown. It wasn't a pretty game, but despite falling to 3-2, I feel really good about Iowa, and I don't think they're going to make the playoff, make the Big Ten championship game. But I think they could be a really annoying team for an SEC team to run into in the Taxslayer Bowl maybe, or the Cheez-It Bowl, something like that. Because if they can force Indiana, a team that is really high octane on offense that we've seen this year, if they can force them to play a game, an Iowa game where they only scored 20 points and 7 of those were on the last drive of the game, they can probably do that to anybody in the country. And looking at Iowa's schedule, and not in a sense of how many games can they get, how many teams can they screw up? They're off this week. They get a breather, and they really go head forward into Big Ten football. Well, you got Wisconsin on the road coming out of the break, a rivalry there that you probably will win that one. Wisconsin has been bad this year. The next week, Penn State coming into town. Penn State's offense is awful. Their quarterback is not good. Their running game is their best part, and what's Iowa good at stopping? Their run. Got a game against Minnesota. Then Oregon comes in November 8th. Oregon's offense looked a little better than Penn State's on Saturday. We'll get into that game, but that one could be interesting. They got to go out to Southern Cal, but they play at USC. That's an offense that I think they can shut down. I don't think Iowa wins probably more than 8 games this year, but they could be a really annoying team that if you're playing Iowa and you're in the Big Ten, I think you'd be happy with a 20-15 win. LSU and Ole Miss, number 13 Rebels take down the number 4 Tigers 24-19 in Oxford at Vaught Hemingway, and thank the Lord that somebody finally exposed LSU, who I think is probably the second most fraudulent team in the country. We'll get to the other one in a little bit. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier had under 200 yards of passing and less than 60 yards rushing as a team, LSU. That's bad. That's really bad. That's not going to win you a single game, except maybe the 16-10 game up there. But I don't see LSU being in too many of those. Ole Miss's offense is awesome. Almost 500 yards total as a team. Trinidad Chambliss is probably going to be a Heisman candidate now after this game. Is already jumping up a bunch of betting odd boards. His first SEC quarterback in history to throw for 300 yards and rush for 50 in 3 consecutive games. If that stat's not correct and you prove me wrong, send that to the SEC Network for that stat. Kwan Lacey was really good on the ground again. He's been really big for Ole Miss. Obviously when you think Ole Miss, you think quarterbacks as a big part of their offense, but Kwan Lacey has been huge for them this year. And really just in the touchdown numbers. He has 102 carries, 445 yards through 5 games, and that's really good. But 8 touchdowns. 8. He's having a good season. Logan Diggs, former LSU transfer, was able to punch one in there in the later goings of that one. So, fun to see him get that one. But, I mean, if Ole Miss limits some of the penalties, they have 14 in this game for 109 yards. If they limit just a couple of those and maybe get one more stop in there, they probably could win this one 38-16, something like that, 38-13. LSU should not have been in this game for as long as they were. The score felt a lot closer than it actually was. But a good win for Ole Miss, and 5-0, 3-0 in the SEC. They have the early front seat for that game in Atlanta that'll be coming up in December. There's a lot of impact on that one. We'll head out west to Seattle, where the number 1 team in the country went on the road to face off against the Huskies. The second longest winning streak in the country was on the line, and it is now over as Ohio State won that one 24-6. And, this is the reason I'm glad I didn't do my prediction show, because I would have told you this was going to be a really close game. And despite the score saying an 18-point game, it was way worse than that. This is a perfect example of what happens when a good team plays a great team. Because Washington has some great players, but they don't have a great team. Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, a bunch of guys like that are really, really good players, and even some of their receivers have been good this year. Guys like Roebuck, Denzel Boston, guys like that have been good this year, but it wasn't enough to get it done against Ohio State. And you look, and Damon Williams was 18 of 22 for but 173 yards and no touchdowns. Didn't turn the ball over, but no touchdowns. Look at the guys on the ground. Jonah Coleman, 13 carries for 70 yards. They weren't able to get anybody else going. Damon Williams was 13 carries for negative 28 yards. Turnovers weren't a huge impact in this game. Third downs, though, were really where a lot of the bad started happening for Washington. 1 for 11 on third down at home. It's not going to get it done. Ohio State was 6 of 10, and after that mid-second quarter punt, when Washington was up 3-0, I really think they had a chance to get a lead. They scored the field goal to go up 3-0. Early, middle of the second quarter, they force. Ohio State picks up the first down, eventually goes 3 and out, and then you have a punt, and Washington moves the ball pretty well, and they turn it over on downs. I think that was probably the moment of the game right there. If Washington's able to pick up a first down, I think that maybe they can run some more clock off. Maybe they can put some points up. And instead of it being 7-3 Ohio State at the end of the half, it's maybe 10-0 Washington. There are little plays like that, but I don't think there was really much of a worry for Ohio State in this one. There were not a lot of drives in this game, and that's props to Matt Patricia and Ohio State's defense. Washington had a ton of 8 and 10 and 12 play drives that were taking 4 and 5 minutes off the clock and would only go 30-ish yards, so they wasn't killing you in the field position game, but it was taking so much time off the clock that when Ohio State got their offense going, there wasn't enough time for Washington to really get back in this one. So, big win for the Buckeyes. They are probably the best team in the country. They haven't been tested a whole lot yet, but that was definitely a good sign right there. Number 15, Tennessee, going on the road to Starkville to take on the undefeated 4-0 Mississippi State Bulldogs, and the Vols pulled that one out. I'll just say Tennessee cardiologists are making their money this week. Vols 31, Mississippi State 34 in overtime. Listen, you see you remember Tennessee's awesome defense from last year. I think they're fine. Obviously, giving up 34 points and however many yards. I'll pull up that exact number because it's a gaudy number. I do know that. 378 is not terrible, but giving up 378 yards and 34 points is alarming. I will say that, but I think this defense is fine. This defense did not have Jermon McCoy on Saturday. They did not have Ricky Gibson. They were without Jackson Moy for most of the game. He played a little bit. You were without David Hobbs. You didn't see David Sanders until the fourth quarter. There were a lot of guys that are big parts of Tennessee's defense that weren't able to, get a ton of snaps in this game because they've been battling some injuries early in this year. But, Mississippi State capitalized off of field position. There were 3 Tennessee turnovers in this game that led to a 5-play 20-yard touchdown drive from Mississippi State, a 4-play 26-yard drive for a touchdown, and a 5-play 17-yard drive for a touchdown. Other than that, there were only a couple long drives that ended up being the other 13 points in that game. But you take those away, that's 41-13 right there. Tennessee probably looks better in that game if it's a little closer. They probably put up some more points. But obviously, these two guys I'm about to mention were a big part of that. Fluff Bothwell and Devon Booth are a very, very dangerous 1-2 punch at running back. They combined for a ton of yardage in this game. And we'll get into it. The rushing yards were a huge factor in this one. Bothwell, 23 carries for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. Booth, 17 carries, 58 yards and a touchdown. So that's 40 carries for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's getting it done in the SEC because if you're getting almost 5 yards a carry against the front 7 like Tennessee's, you're doing something right. Mike Matthews and Chris Brazzell were huge for Tennessee. They combined for 12 catches for 223 yards and a touchdown. And I firmly believe that Joey Aguilar only has 1 interception this season that was his fault. If you go look at the numbers, there's a lot. and that was a question coming into the year. 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But we'll go back and look at those interceptions. Obviously, you have the big one against Georgia, the jump ball. I think that one's his fault. The one to Staley where he slipped on his route, don't think that's his fault. The one against UAB where he threw it right to his guy and it bounced off his hands and flies 20 feet in the air, don't think that one's his fault. The 2 to Miles Kitselman that hit him right here in the hands that just bounced off and went flying in the air, I don't think are his fault. But obviously, I think he's going to have to be a little better with the accuracy because obviously, other than the Staley one, if he puts a better ball in there, those are probably 3 catches. Maybe not the one against UAB, but definitely the 2 against Mississippi State. But if Tennessee can fix the drops issues, I think that's probably the best offense in the country. I mean, they're able to run the ball really well, and instead of you look at the numbers and you're like, well, so and so doesn't have as many yards as we did last year. Look, nobody's going to put up Dylan Sampson numbers this year, but you have 3 guys that have, one of them has 335 yards and 4 touchdowns. The next one has 305 yards and 4 touchdowns, and the guy behind him has 167 yards and a touchdown and 3 touchdowns. That's getting it done. I mean, that is almost not there, but almost 800 yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground from those 3 guys. That's getting that will do. Arion Carter was awesome in this game. Ended up winning SEC Defensive Player of the Week. Had 17 tackles and a pass breakup on the last play of the game. And look, Tennessee was worse on third downs. Got outrushed by almost 60 yards. Had more penalties and more turnovers and won the game. So I think Tennessee fans, you just take a road win in the SEC because if you imagine that game with Nico at quarterback, it probably is 41-13. But it's Mississippi State winning 41-13, and you're wondering why we're still Tennessee fans. On to the night slate. Started off, we had Arizona 3-0, going on the road to face the undefeated and 14th ranked Iowa State Cyclones. And that one was Cyclones from start to finish. 39-14 Iowa State. And look, Iowa State was dominant from start to finish. They were able to have those long, methodical drives, but they also were able to take advantage of good field position when Arizona, turned the ball over, wasn't able to flip the field. But man, I tell you, I feel terrible for Noah Fifita. The quarterback at Arizona was looking great after the 2023 season. Had a young quarterback, had a good young team. Jedd Fisch at the helm, and everything looked great for Arizona. They had just won the Alamo Bowl against Oklahoma, and Jedd Fisch leaves for Washington, your best receiver, and Tet McMillan gets drafted, is in Carolina with the Panthers, and then Sicario Davis, your best defensive player, your best defensive back, hits the portal and goes back with his old head coach there in Washington, and now it's Noah Fifita versus the world, and he doesn't have enough guys around him to help, and Arizona's probably going to have a rough year, but props to Iowa State because the Big 12, from what we've seen, is it's tough, man. Arizona State and TCU, Arizona State, Baylor the week before. I mean, there are games in this conference every week, week after week, that are a big deal. And going on being able to get a big win at home like that is huge. Iowa State 5-0 now, almost looking bowl eligible, and will probably be there in a couple of weeks. The big one down in Athens, Georgia, number 17 Alabama 24, number 5 Georgia 21. So a huge win for the Crimson Tide. Kirby Smart got outcoached again by Kalen DeBoer, and I mean Kalen DeBoer and Alabama are kind of the daddies to Georgia. It really is that case. I mean, Georgia's only win against Alabama under Kirby Smart came in the 2022 National Championship game, a game where Alabama did not have John Mechie because he tore his ACL in the SEC Championship game. They didn't have Jamison Williams, who tore his ACL, I believe, first or second quarter. It was first half of that championship game. So Alabama was down to, throwing a couple guys out there for the or the 2021 National Championship. We're just throwing guys out there to see what worked. And obviously it didn't. Georgia's defense prevailed, and it was a very ugly national championship game. But listen, there was one play that made this game. It's crazy you play a 60-minute football game and one play can change the game, but that fourth down play call. Georgia had the ball inside their red zone, 4th and 1. Obviously I think they got a bad call, bad snap, spot, I meant, on third down. But what are you doing? I mean, when you rushed it, you hurry to the ball and you snap it. Go up to the line and point some things out. Do a little, a dummy snap. Do the, clap and hut, because I will bet you that there were, I don't remember what the exact number is, but my guess is 2 or 3 of those Alabama guys would have jumped off sides. Obviously, why don't you just tie the game? I think that should have probably been the number one point. Why don't you just tie the game? You're down 3. You were down 10 at halftime. Your defense hasn't let Alabama score through the first, at that point, what is it, the 26, 27, 28 minutes of the game, of the second half? And you tie it up, at least you give yourself a chance to go to overtime. You go for it and don't get it, you lose. And that's what happened. And, another reason, if you were dead set on going for it, call a timeout. You have a timeout. Set something up. You have, Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp, 2 of the best blocking tight ends in the SEC, and they play for Georgia, so they're going to be good at blocking. Cash Jones was in at tailback for Georgia. If we go over to Georgia and look at their season stats, you're going to wonder even more why Cash Jones was in there. As a total this year, Cash Jones has a total of 5 carries for 0 yards and 0 touchdowns. Then you have guys like Chauncey Bowens, who is, a freshman, had a really good game against Alabama. He was rushing for 7 yards a carry that night. Nate Frazier, one of your, a sophomore, but was one of your biggest running backs last year. He's 210 pounds. You're telling me he can't get you a yard? And even when you want to go to the guy you got out of the transfer portal, your battering ram, and Josh McCray, that's 6'1", 240, you tell me he can't get you a yard? And nothing against Cash Jones, but I just don't understand why that's the guy you go with. Obviously, he's your third down back because he gives you a lot out of the backfield when it comes to receptions, because he has 6 catches for 57 yards. But if you're going to run it, why not just give it to a running back who had a good game? Because before that, Cash Jones had, I think, 1 rush for -5 yards before that, and then finished with 2 rushes -7. That's not getting it done. Georgia should be 2-2 right now, but Tennessee beat themselves before Georgia could, and Georgia beat themselves once again, and it's going to show up in the win-loss column, because Georgia played a road game at home. They did not really attempt to get the passing game going. Gunnar Stockton was 13 of 20 for 130 yards. Only 3 guys had multiple receptions. You hear all the talk in the offseason about how much Georgia loaded up on offense. Obviously, you get Josh McCray from the running back from Illinois. You go and you get Colby Young, a good receiver. You go and get Zachariah Branch, the speedster from out west and UCLA. And these guys, had good numbers for their career. Obviously Branch did it at USC and was really good in the return game. And obviously this is the second year for Colby Young at Georgia, but he transferred in from Miami where he was putting up good yards. Was not much of an impact last year, and just not getting it done. I really do feel like Mike Bobo requires all this talent just to almost Penn State it and just not develop them and just make them look worse. Ty Simpson was awesome. 276 yards, 2 touchdowns. Third downs were the difference in this one. Georgia was 2 for 8. Bama was 13 for 19. That is incredible. And that was a Ryan Grubb and Ty Simpson and Jeremy Bernard and Isaiah Horton and Ryan Williams, all those guys. That was a masterclass by them. And even the Alabama running backs, obviously that was your first game with Jam Miller back. He was going to be on a snaps. I thought he would be on a snaps limit, but went 15 carries for 46 yards. Kevin Riley, 10 carries for 30 yards. Yeah, that's only 3 yards a carry, but you were doing most of your damage through the air. So being able to keep Georgia's defense, pushed up enough on the line that you were able to still throw the ball and run the ball effectively, I think that's huge. Props to you. We'll head to the College Game Day game of the week. That one, number 6 Oregon on the road for a whiteout at number 3 Penn State. Finally a whiteout at night again. and Oregon, 30, Penn State 24 in 2 overtimes. I don't think anybody but outside of Happy Valley really had a lot of faith in Penn State. You can say what the game day crew all picked them. I think they do that for just to make it look better on them. You're not going to go to Alabama for the Iron Bowl and pick Auburn. Everybody pick Auburn. No. So I think it was more of just looks better on TV if that huge crowd there is cheering instead of booing you for picking Oregon. But, I mean, Penn State loses a big game at home. I'd say shocker, but nobody's shocked by that. Drew Aller is probably the most overrated quarterback we've had in college football in the last decade. I mean, there's a couple of guys that didn't pan out. Nico for one, and obviously Jackson Arnold might be brought up, Malachi Nelson, but I mean, Drew Aller year after year after year. I mean, I think this is his 3rd straight year starting for Penn State, and every year, man, this is the guy. This is the first-round draft pick. This is the first overall pick. It's the best quarterback in college football. And we keep listening to coaches and NFL scouts and analysts tell us this. And if that's our best college quarterback right now to make it to the NFL, then I can see why the NFL's offense is going down and not a lot of people are watching, because if that's the best we got to offer, I wouldn't want to watch him play for any team on Sunday. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton were complete non-factors in this game. I mean, those two guys are all offseason. All you hear about is they are the best running back duo in the country. Nothing for those people up in South Bend that made it to the national championship and beat Penn State and had better rushing numbers than Penn State with those two guys. But if you're 2 5-star running backs that I believe are juniors and they're seniors now. They've been there for long enough. 12 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown. 11 carries, 21 yards, no touchdown. That's bad. When you have 5 stars running behind 5-star offensive linemen, I get Oregon's defense is good, but still, because Dan Lanning and his guys, I mean, he's a madman, and his team is full of them. Dante Moore is probably going to be a Heisman finalist. Looked awesome. But I'm shocked as to why 2 seniors that are preseason All-Americans and Allen and Singleton couldn't do anything when this guy De'Aaron Hill had a freshman for Oregon, had less carries than both of them and more yards than both of them put together. 10 carries for 82 yards. I believe he got in the end zone a time there in the 3rd quarter. Maybe on a pass game, maybe on a pass play. Yes, I had 2 catches for 12 yards and a touchdown, so he was also big. DeCorian Moore, another freshman, 7 catches, 89 yards, didn't get in the end zone, but helped him get down there. And, man, props to Oregon. They played awesome in that game. We talked all week that it was going to be a James Franklin moment that cost them this game, but it was a Drew Aller moment, a pick on the first play of double overtime. And people forget, I mean, you get the second overtime. Oregon goes down, scores. I don't remember, they did not get the 2-point conversion. So, and they were really close to picking it off and taking it back for 2, which would have meant that Penn State just had to get in the end zone and they win it. They would win that one 32-30. First play of overtime, Drew Aller throws a pick. And I'm gonna label this a James Franklin moment just in the simple fact that he's the one that's trotted Drew Aller out there for 3 years in a row now. When there's a kid who was on his roster the past couple of years, who is down in Little Como, Columbia, Missouri, and his team hasn't lost a game. His team hasn't really had a close game. Their closest game was a 9-point win, against South Carolina, who, we'll talk about them a little later. They're something. I'm not exactly sure yet. But, man, Bo Pribula has thrown for 1,200 yards on 75% completion percentage, 9 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, and has also run for 121 yards and 3 touchdowns. Yet your guy and Drew Aller that you continue to tell us how great he is. And Bo Pribula's played 5 games. He's played an SEC opponent. He has played a non-conference power opponent. Well, Penn State has played Nevada, FIU, and Villanova, other than Oregon. Drew Aller, in all 4 of those games combined, has 763 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on 62% completion percentage, and has run for 70 yards and no more touchdowns. And the numbers speak for themselves. Obviously, I don't think Pribula would have excelled against Oregon, but I think if he's your guy this year, you send Aller off to the NFL and you say Pribula's your guy this year, I think we're looking at Penn State a lot differently. But props to Bo Perbula and what him and Drinkwitz have been able to do at Missouri. We'll probably be talking about them a little bit later down the road, down the season. They haven't really had a too tough of an opponent yet. A game that I thought was going to be a close one. Kentucky at South Carolina. South Carolina 2-2, but they get a night game at home. And they did what South Carolina typically does in night games at home. They won 35-13. But all this game taught me is that these are probably the two worst teams in the SEC, not named Florida and Arkansas. And Seth McGowan, running back for Kentucky, is a great running back on a bad team. He had 17 carries for 112 yards and a touchdown against South Carolina. A South Carolina defense that is supposed to be good at stopping the run. But he's good. I mean, you go look at some of his stats just from the year as a whole. Obviously, he had the great game. But on the year, he's having to split snaps with Dante Dowdle. 68 rushes, 380 yards, it's almost 6 yards a carry, and 7 touchdowns is awesome. Obviously, Kentucky throws the ball about as often as a military school. And Lenora Sellers has absolutely no help on offense. Nick Harbor, nothing. Roswell Faison, that the big transfer running back, has done nothing. So, yeah, Kentucky and South Carolina might be just the two of those teams that the bigger guys kind of beat up on. And South Carolina has a gauntlet coming up. So don't expect that 3-2 record to look very good much longer. Prayers to Beamer, though, man, because he's going to need them. And the last game of the night, number 25 BYU on the road at 4-0 at Colorado, who is 2-2 on the season. BYU got down big, but ended up winning this one 24-21. Again, Colorado had an early lead. Cougars showed some resilience on more than one occasion. Both teams ran the ball well, but the difference in this one was Bear Bachmeier, the quarterback for BYU, over Caden Salter. I think that was the big difference in this game. Salter's fourth quarter interception kind of sealed it. Not much really to talk about there. BYU, despite losing Jake Retzlaff in the transfer portal, he, I believe, was actually just dismissed from the university or chose to leave. Had some off the field controversy that has been cleared up. But I mean, BYU looks pretty good, and I think that they will be a lot better than most people say. We're saying in the preseason because of what Bachmeier's been able to do. So yeah, props to them. And we will look now at the new AP poll. Let me 1 second. I'll pull up last week's just to look at how big some of the differences are. So we'll start at the bottom. Back at 25, a new team. Well, not their first time in this season, but new this week. Arizona State back in the top 25 at 4-1. Mississippi State is still sitting on the outside at 29. So, obviously they took the loss to Tennessee at home this week. Virginia newly in at 4-1, picking up the big win over Florida State. The AP poll, you're going to start seeing this doesn't mean anything for who you beat or who you didn't beat because Virginia has a win over Florida State. So you would think that Virginia needs to be ranked higher than Florida State. Well, Florida State has a win over Alabama. And you would think that, well, if Florida State is ranked higher than Alabama, then Virginia should be higher than both of them. Well, that's not the case. Virginia at 24 picked up a big win, has a ton of room to grow, and I think they have an opportunity. But they got a big one next week against Louisville. We'll talk about that one on Thursday. BYU moved up 2 spots from 25 to 23. They look good. What can I say? They look good. Illinois moved up 1 spot to 22 after their big win at home against Illinois or against USC. Notre Dame up 1 spot from 22 to 21 after beating Arkansas so bad that they fired everybody. I feel like that should have gotten a little more respect. Michigan was off this past week. They dropped a spot. They flipped with Missouri, who wasn't off this week, and beat the crap out of a really bad UMass team. Florida State at 18 dropped 10 spots. I don't know if that discredits Virginia or makes or it's just a bad pick for people seeing. I think this is a case of the AP poll voters not watching Virginia at all this season and not knowing how good Chandler Morris is and how good that team is on offense. Obviously, their defense is bad, but I mean that's not a 10-spot drop loss right there. Georgia Tech won a game and they dropped a spot because they didn't win by enough, I guess, against Wake Forest. Now, obviously, if you watch that game, Wake Forest got cheated out of a win there, so I'm not too mad at Georgia Tech for dropping down. Vanderbilt's 5-0 in an SEC team, and they're number 16 in the country. I'll put it this way: there are 4 SEC teams in front of them that have losses. Vanderbilt's killed everybody they've played this year. I think them being at 16, and this is coming from a Tennessee fan, so I think that should tell you kind of how real this opinion is. They've killed everybody this year, and I don't know if there's 15 if there's 15 teams, 16 teams, whatever it is, better than Vanderbilt. If you look at their schedule as a whole, we'll go over some of their scores. Beat Charleston Southern 45-3. That's handling your FCS opponent. They went on the road and killed Virginia Tech that had just barely scraped out South Carolina. So then they said, all right, we'll go on the road to South Carolina the next week, the number 11 team in the country. Now, Lenore Sellers didn't play much in that game because of the injury, but 31-7, I mean, I think Sellers might make it 24-14, but not flipping it into a win for South Carolina. You play Georgia State again, a team that beat you last year, and you put 70 on them. And then you play a Utah State team who has had a tough start to the season schedule-wise, but you beat them by almost the same amount Texas A&M did, and we haven't said the Aggies yet. Now, obviously, they have a win at Notre Dame, but we got to start giving Vanderbilt a little respect. And you know what? If they beat Alabama this weekend, they'll probably go up to 12. It's just the case it is. Tennessee stayed put. They're now 4-1 after their scare at Mississippi State. Iowa State stays in their same spot at 14 after the big win against Arizona. LSU fell 9 spots from 4 to 13. I don't think that's far enough, but they have some things on their schedule that other teams up here don't have. We'll get into that. Georgia fell 7 spots after losing at home to a worse-ranked team. It doesn't make sense because Ole Miss was number 13. They played at home against the number 4 team in the country. The number 4 team in the country loses that game by 5 points. They back them up 9 spots. Georgia is the number 5 team in the country, and they lose at home by 3 points to the number, Alabama was 18, 17, whatever it was, and they only dropped 7 spots. I mean, make it make sense. But anyway, Georgia loses and drops to 12. I think them and LSU probably should be flipped in spots. I think LSU's a little better than Georgia because Georgia's beat themselves twice this year. They should be 2-2 and sitting at 24 if they would even be ranked. Texas Tech, though, number 11 at 4-0 on the year. They got a game next week at Houston. That should be a fun one. We saw Houston have a big comeback win over Oregon State. So that should be a fun one. And Texas Tech really looks like the big dog in the Big 12. Breaking into the top 10 for the second time this year. We'll see how it fares the second time around. Alabama. They jumped up 7 spots, deservedly so. If you go on the road and beat the number 5 team in the country, you should be in the top 10. I think that's fair. Number 9, Texas, jumped up a spot from 10 to 9. They were off this past week, and they haven't beaten a Power 4 opponent. The one they did beat, or the one they did play, beat them. And they looked terrible in that game, and they've looked terrible ever since. We put that one next to Texas early in the season. And I think it was the worst thing that we could have done. Because let's look at Texas. 14-7 loss against Ohio State. Okay, 38-7 win over San Jose State. 27-10 over UTEP. 55-0 over Sam Houston. I mean, you're not beating anybody that's worth any semblance. I mean, just an all-around confusing pick. We got their quarterback Arch flexing on Sam Houston players after rushing touchdowns. Like, it's just kind of embarrassing. I don't think Texas should be ranked in the top 10. I think Texas should probably be where Vanderbilt is at 15, and Vanderbilt should be where Texas is at 9. That's my opinion. Indiana jumped up a couple spots, and I think deservedly so. Winning at Iowa is incredibly difficult. They're now number 8 at 5-0. Number 7, Penn State. Similarly to Texas, Penn State hasn't beaten anybody worth anything, really. And that will continue next week when they in their game. But week 1, you have a 46-11 win over Nevada. Week 2, 34-0 over FIU. Week 3, 52-6 over Villanova. And then your one chance against a good team, you lose. You know, I know there's probably not going to be a single AP poll voter that watches this because, I mean, if they don't watch the games, why are they going to watch a breakdown of them? I don't think Penn State should be ranked in the top 10 again until they beat a top 10 team. Now, they have a couple opportunities on their schedule. If you look a little further down the road, they have a stretch where they go at Ohio State and then home the next week versus Indiana. They'll probably lose both of those games, and they will be 9-3, and they'll probably be number 6 because, you know, we don't watch football. We just see the logo and think that they should be good. But why are we ranking them in the top 10 and saying that loss is, and obviously it wasn't a huge, they didn't get killed. But, I mean, if we're going to drop LSU and Georgia 7 and 9 spots for, you know, obviously Georgia 7 spots losing at home to a team that was ranked lower than them, why is Penn State only dropping 4 spots after losing at home to a team that was ranked lower than them? It doesn't make any sense to me. Texas A&M at number 6 in the country. I think it's fair. They moved up 3 spots. They got a game next week, this weekend against Mississippi State. I think you need to watch out for that one because if you see what Mississippi State did against Tennessee, if they have any semblance, and I think Brennan Thompson should be back for A&M this week. We'll see what his injury report is because obviously didn't play much against Tennessee. If he can be back against A&M, that could be a big upset brewing. And also number 8 has lost like every week this year. Florida State, Alabama, Notre Dame. So watch out if you're the number 8 team in the country, and that's Indiana, and they're off this week, but they got to go to Oregon the following week, so they'll probably lose that one, but they might not be ranked number 8 next week. We don't know. Oklahoma is the 5th ranked team in the country, and I mean they have some all right wins, but nothing that really blows your socks off. I mean they at the time they had a couple of the big night games on ABC, but you beat Illinois State 35-3. 32-point win over an FCS team isn't great. You beat Oklahoma, or you beat Michigan 24-13. That looked like an all right win. Michigan looks pretty good, so but they're not like a top 10 win. You beat Temple 42-3, and then you beat Auburn 24-17 in a game that was handed to you. And now you're the 5th ranked team in the country. And obviously, if John Mateer's on the field, I have no problem with this at this point in the year. Arkansas was like number 7 early in 2022 or 2021. We saw what happened to them. But, we're rewarding a team that didn't play this week. And we're rewarding a team that doesn't have their quarterback and won't for the next month. We've seen teams drop in the AP poll despite winning because somebody got hurt. Tennessee, Hendon Hooker. Florida State, Jordan Travis. Teams usually get punished without their quarterback, and Oklahoma seemingly got rewarded. Everybody in the AP saw the post that John Mateer made and said, "Hey, surgery went well." That doesn't mean he's ready to go. He had a broken thumb. Those are in his throwing hand. Holding the football, the thumb's probably the most important hand or finger on your hand. A position swap with LSU. Ole Miss at number 4 at 5-0. They jumped up 9 spots. They are off this week and then have a game at home against Washington State, so they'll probably stay at that spot for a while, maybe drop a spot depending on some of the other games. Miami at number 3. They dropped a spot down from number 2. They were off this past week, but they got to travel to Tallahassee and play at Florida State on Saturday. We'll talk about that one a little later in the week, but the one time we saw a highly ranked team go into Florida State, they didn't come out the same ranking. Oregon jumped up 4 spots to number 2. I think deservedly so. And once again, we have Ohio State and Oregon at 1 and 2. Oregon again is off this next week. They will play host to Indiana in 2 weeks. That should be a fun one. We'll talk about that one a little closer to time. And then Ohio State, remains as the number one team in the country. So yeah, that will do it for this Tuesday edition of the Mark My Words College Sports Show here on the X Sports Network. We'll be back tomorrow to just kind of recap what's going on in college football. We'll look at Heisman odds. We'll look at some power ratings. We'll maybe even make some power ratings. We just got to see what's going on in the world of college sports. And then this week, Thursday, we will be doing our prediction show instead of Friday. So Thursday, we'll have the prediction show. So you get 3 shows in 3 days. So for Michael Marks, this has been the Mark My Words podcast. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.
Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.